Okay, now we're going to look at Chapter 10. We're going to talk about power and politics in organizations. We have, in this chapter, different learning objectives where we want to understand the differences between what is power and what is actually authority. We're going to look at 5 interpersonal power bases. We're going to discuss how subunits within an organization acquire and use power. We're going to look at impression management tactics, and we're going to identify reasons perceived authority can influence a person's behavior. Personal power of great leaders, they make things happen by utilizing 4 different types of personal power. They communicate their vision to others. They have the ability to overcome people's resistance to change in organizations. They're able to take resources and mobilize them into action. They're also able to exercise emotional intelligence by managing their own ambitions and not lose perspective within the organization. Power is a pervasive part of organizational life. People get things done through effective power. A person's ability to use or react to power is determined by how well they understand it, how they know how to use it, and how they can anticipate its effects. When we look at power, we sometimes couple it with leadership, but not all leaders have power, and not all people with power are leaders. So power and authority is people with power have the ability to get others to do what one wants them to do. This is a little different than leadership when you're influencing others to do that. It involves a relationship between 2 or more people, and it is not to be forced on people. People share power. Unless some power is shared, productivity, customer satisfaction can't be maximized. It does take time to implement within organizations. People have authority, which is designated as the formal power of a person, what they have in order to get their job done. Characteristics is part of the person's position. People that are reporting to them or subordinates accept that as the person's authority, and it's used from the top down in part of the organization in terms of structure and reporting mechanisms. When we look at bases of power, we have the situation where people are in power situations. We have the structure of the organization, and certain people have interpersonal power in terms of the way they exercise their personality. We're going to look at the different kinds of interpersonal power that people have, the 5 different ways. We have people that actually have legitimate power. It's the ability to influence others by being in a more powerful position. That's like the authority that, my title as manager, and I have that legitimate power and the authority and responsibility to get it done. Also reward power. If I have the power to give you raises or give you new job assignments, I have the power to reward your behavior. I can also have coercive power where I might be able to punish you for noncompliance. Like if you don't finish this on time, then I'm not going to promote you, or if you don't do a certain thing. So I can coerce you by how I use some of the rewards or punish you for certain noncompliance. There's also expert power where we have people who can influence others because their expertise. We see that in many different kinds of organizations where somebody's an expert in biology or software or neurology and so forth, and people come to them for advice. And then we have referent power where people just like these people. They have power because they have charisma. If we look at the need for power, again, this is one of McClellan's that we talked about in our motivational theories. It's a strong desire for people to influence others. So there's action that produces motion in others. There's also people who have a concern for their reputation when they need power. When we have, in terms of organizational structures that can create formal and informal power, we have specific individuals that can perform specific jobs and make certain decisions, and that gives them certain power. We have other kinds of structural power where it's based on, like we said, on resources, decision-making, information power. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Resource power, individuals have channels to resources. They can allocate downward, they can limit your resources, they can open up resources, they can make you dependent on resources, so they have resource power. They can also make sure you comply with goals by the fact that you have resources. So if resources are allocated on the basis of performance and compliance, then you'll be able to complete your goal. We can also have improved performance with resource power. Lower level managers often have adequate power and resources to control their destinies or not. Then we have decision-making power, and that means the decisions I make can happen to others, subunits, or different areas in the organization. And a person or a subunit with decision-making power influences how decisions are made, what alternatives are made, and when that decision is made. A person with information power, which it's interesting that people are having less of that with the internet. It used to be like if I had information and didn't tell you, it gave me power, but a lot of power is being shared around in organizations because of information power. We have access to relevant, important information gives people power. It's a basis for making decisions. Those who have that information have the power. A person's power may be weakened by sharing too much information. So you'll see some people, they don't want to tell you something because it gives them power to know it. This may happen with subordinates. A person exerting power upward has some personal power, but they may not have any authority. So that's something to think about. Some people may have power but no authority. When we look at subunits and interdepartmental power, we are looking at it from a basis of strategic contingency. An event or activity that is important to accomplishing organizational goals, and we want to focus on the ability of that subunit to have some kind of power. It's strategic of us to give certain kinds of units more power. The power differential is often factored by how can that group cope with uncertainty. Where is that subunit central in terms of the decision making and productivity, and can we substitute another subunit or some other kind of organization as a result of that? We have interdepartmental power too, where we see power acquired by subunits and power differentials that happen, and this particular slide talks about some of that we just mentioned about centrality, substitution, and coping with uncertainty. When we look at coping with uncertainty, we want to look at trying to provide information, and to absorb certain factors. That's one way that we can help subunits cope with that. When we're looking at centrality, we try to have subunits more central to the flow of work so that they can acquire that power. So they can affect other units by how central they are within their flow, how much they can stop, impede, or enhance the workflow. A subunit has power if its activities have an immediate impact. So maybe sales or marketing might have more impact than accounting or something right away, and that might actually have a higher degree of power in the organization. We also might be able to, if a unit makes itself, indispensable, and nobody else can do their job, they have more power as well. So a subunit can increase its power by assuming responsibility for activities that are important for the organization and make it difficult for others to copy and do. We also have whether subunits are obedient to authority, and exercising power in an authoritative way isn't the only way power can be exerted. It's often exerted by individuals who maybe have just minimal power. An individual may be able to influence others simply because he or she may have perceived power by others. Again, this is a little bit like our charismatic power that we talked about, our referent power, when we looked at the 5 powers at the beginning of the chapter. Some potential strategies and tactics could be individuals and subunits start engaging in a lot of political behavior, and this might occur outside recognized power systems, and it's designed specifically to benefit that subunit, and oftentimes this could be at the expense of the organization, and something we need to watch out for. Political behavior sidetracks the formal power, and it could sabotage some efforts in the organization. Some of these political tactics include facts where they might evade organizational rules. We might have friendships and relationships that inhibit processes. We might attempt to persuade others to think, like a particular subunit, so we start getting that, collusion. We might organizationally attempt to change the different patterns between subunits as a political strategy. Another thing that happens is impression management. What do people think and react to in terms of image? And these are, some managers and some units want to preserve their own self-image. They want to influence the way others perceive them, so they actually take action based on what's that going to look like. They want to create a favorable impression with others in the workplace, and so they get certain reputations for certain things. Here's some tactics that you'll see. Self-presentation, where people are often smiling, they make eye contact, they have a positive tone of voice, they dress in a way that seems appropriate for the organization, they have high levels of energy. These hopefully are authentic. Others, when they do things for others, they give compliments, they show interest, they listen, they agree with others, they do favors. These are some impression management tactics. Now, when they start playing politics and we see political games, we have, these are outlined in your book, where you look at insurgency, where they come in and actually come in to sabotage the efforts of an organization, and then you have other units that might be counterinsurgents that they spend their efforts attacking the insurgents. Then we have sponsorship of someone that says, I'll support you in this. We have coalition building. We have the line and staff that we talked about, and we have whistleblowing, where people tell on other people about certain behaviors. This leads us to talk about ethics and power in politics. And each manager has a responsibility for ethical behavior in the organizations, have codes of ethics that they go over with managers now that are very important. A manager's behavior needs to satisfy certain types of criteria that we're going to discuss to be considered ethical. We're going to talk about the utilitarian, individual, and distributive justice types of approaches. A utilitarian is when the manager's behavior is trying to satisfy as many people as they can, both inside and outside the organization. How can they contribute to the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Individually, the manager's behavior respects just individual rights, like are people able to speak out? Are they able to have privacy? Are they able to have due process? These are ethical aspects of management. And then distributive justice. The manager's behavior respects the rules of justice. It looks at everything from a fair and equitable point of view and not arbitrary, so everybody's treated the same, and it's considered distributed justice in an organization.